I think the CFO's job is to help everybody else in the company, leadership team on down, do their jobs better because they've got the right information at the right time in a format that makes sense to them with analytical support when they need it, even if they don't always initially know they need it, to help them interpret what these numbers are telling them, and then figure out what does that mean for the future.
Got it.
And you do that, you build better plans. You do that, you build better accountability to achieving those plans or modifying those plans when the real world gets in the way. And you say, well, that didn't work out the way I thought it was. What went wrong? Or what went right?
So we have Ted Stone, managing partner of the Tech CXO New York office. It's good to have you on today, Ted.
Yeah. Good morning, Michael. It is a delight to be here.
Good to have you. So let's just get a little bit of background about you so that the audience can know, a little bit about, where you came from, how you got here. I think, what was really interesting to me about when you and I first met was your engineering background, right? And I loved the story of how you went to school and you got the engineering education, and then you're like, what the hell am I doing here? So why don't we start there and get to know a little bit more about Ted Stone?
Happy to do it. I am, as you say, a recovering engineer. And the most important thing I learned as an undergraduate engineer is I wanted to go to graduate school in business. I was fortunate to have a real engineer for a roommate as an undergraduate, and I saw what that looked like, and I said, there's probably a better career path for me.
I love how you said recovering engineer. I keep telling people now I'm in recovery from commercial banking, right? So I'm in recovery from that. So, but I mean, recovering from engineering though. I mean,
yeah.
So I feel like there's a lot of, and actually some of the people that I've met from your team who are, have spent a lot of time in this engineering space. I mean, what made you want to make the change? And then how do you take your engineering background and kind of bring it to what you do now?
Sure. I do not like engineering. I actually kind of enjoy it. I just realized that doing it for a living, there are other people who just do it better. And when I went to graduate school in business, and same engineering mindset applied to a different set of problems, in many respects a broader scope because you're dealing with the human implications of whatever the thing is you're engineering. It just felt right. And I basically built a career being the engineer who can talk to the business guy who can talk to the engineers. And when I went to graduate school, it was a generalist curriculum. So I had a chance to sort of sample all the functional disciplines and kind of settled that finance with a strong operational general management focus is what I wanted to do. So if you're the CFO who can talk to the engineers and the engineers feel comfortable talking to the CFO, that's a really useful skill set to have in any business that's got lots of engineers running around in it.
Yeah, I like that I think you said, and I think I might have even read it in your bio, is you connect the tech team to the executive team. And do you find that that's a challenge with a lot of businesses that are out there?
For sure. Yeah, so I know some brilliant programmers on the IT side, developers developing hardware, or chemical engineers developing pharmaceutical compounds that don't speak English the way you and I think of English.
Got it.
So how do you connect them to the business purpose of why they're inventing this cool new pharmaceutical compound, or why they're developing this application that does all this stuff with these massive amounts of data and distills it down to something that an investment banker can look at and say, "Oh, I know what to do."
You're almost like the liaison between the tech team and the executive team, which I would imagine would help to be able to make more informed decisions at the top of the house.
And yes, with a but, that in most of the companies I've worked in, the day-to-day liaison with those people is a product manager, somebody whose job it is to connect commercial application to whatever the underlying technology is. Now, what I found as a CFO, planning the business, allocating resources across competing products or priorities or functions. Should be sales heavy, marketing heavy as we commercialize, whatever that is. In that CFO's resource allocation and planning function, if you speak tech and you speak commercial, let's we talk to the product people, let's we talk to the development people, let's we talk to the engineers, help them understand how their work fits into the larger whole, and provides, and by doing that, makes it more likely that it'll all fit together in a larger whole.
Very cool. Very cool. So before we get into Tech CXO, what you guys do, what you're all about, how did you go from, this recovering engineer
Yeah.
to, managing partner of Tech CXO New York, right? How, what's been your journey? What's been your story? I mean, when you and I talked, it seemed like you have really spent you have a diverse experiences, right? You've worked from startups to billion-dollar corporations. So I'd love to hear kind of the journey and maybe some of your favorite parts. What were some of your favorite stops, and where did you learn the most from?
Sure. The high level summary is I got my first top finance job in a decent sized organization when I was a child. I was 27 years old, but it was a division within Pfizer, which has a big companies like that have safety nets so that no one individual at a division level can really screw anything up too badly. But if we count that, I had a total of 12 full-time top finance person, with the exception of a division controller at Pfizer. The rest all had CFO titles attached to them. For four big public companies, Pfizer, Monsanto, the Searle subsidiary, Thomson Reuters, before Reuters was part of it, and Xerox Corporation. But also for three publicly traded companies for a total of 8 years, for four private equity-backed businesses for a total of 14 years, two angel-backed businesses for a total of 4 years. So a lot of, as you suggest, wide diversity in scale, and industries in one level, although every one of those companies was characterized by having lots of engineers running around, either inventing what was going to be our product X years from now, long lead times in pharmaceuticals, shorter lead time in software, or helping our current clients use the product that we have. There's a go-to-market approach that's referred to as customer intimacy, where you know more about how your customer uses your product than they do. And you bring that knowledge you use that knowledge to inform your product roadmap of how you develop your product. You use that knowledge to help them use your product more effectively, creates a barrier where it makes it much harder for other people to get in there. Obviously helps them drive more value in their business. Being able to set up the internal systems within a company to manage how's the engineering and the development, how does that have to flow into this market feedback that we're continuously getting, to create value for our customers, and by the way, create value for us.
So for the listeners, this sounds like it could be, obviously our listener group is, everything from, small to large, business owners. I mean, is there any real key takeaways, from those experiences that you could give to the listeners?
I think so. And maybe this is a way to segue to the topic that came up in our last conversation that I think resonates with me still. I think the CFO's job is to help everybody else in the company, leadership team on down, do their jobs better because they've got the right information at the right time in a format that makes sense to them, with analytical support when they need it, even if they don't always initially know they need it, to help them interpret what these numbers are telling them, and then figure out what does that mean for the future.
Got it.
And you do that, you build better plans. You do that, you build better accountability to achieving those plans or modifying those plans when the real world gets in the way. And you say, well, that didn't work out the way I thought it was. What went wrong? Or what went right? And then now what do I do differently because of what I've just learned? And creating that management operating system for constant feedback between the real world and our plans so that we keep tweaking our plans. That's the fun of the job. And it's what made a difference in all of the companies where I was a full-time CFO between 1980 and 2016.
I feel like that's like the kind of progression, right? I mean, you and I have talked about this previously, right? There's people that are really, really good at what they do, whether it be creating a product or creating an idea for a service, right? But then they get to the point where they have a great product, they have a great service, and it's like, okay, well, now how do we execute? And then how do we look at the data that we're collecting to then make more informed decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's interesting that companies get to that point, and it's funny, right? Sometimes we see these large companies that are out there that have a, quote unquote controller, but, not a full-time, CFO. And, maybe this is a good segue to kind of get into, Tech CXO and, the services that you guys provide, to clients out there.
Sure. Our underlying premise is that every company, no matter what your scale is, needs that skill set in all of their C-suite jobs. Somebody who's thinking holistically about the business, all across all the functions, from prospects to customers to how do we serve them to what do we have to do to make sure we serve them, but doing so from their particular area of functional expertise. I wouldn't expect a marketing guy to build out a budget, a financial budget in a financial model, and he wouldn't expect me, to build out an advertising plan. Now, but if I'm aware that that's important and he's aware that that's important, we can work well together. Now, the people who can do that, and Tech CXO is certainly not unique in this respect, but I think what we're unusually effective about it. The way somebody can do that, if you're an early stage company that cannot yet afford that kind of a person, is that they've done it before. So in Tech CXO's case, we basically require that every incoming partner have spent at least 10 years carrying that business card in a full-time role in some small companies of the scale of our clients. So we're not just some big company schmuck coming in and telling them how we do things at Microsoft, but who's also done something at a mid-cap or higher level, so that our clients look at us and say, well, this is a credible guide for how I'm going to get to the promised land. The premise is everybody needs that level of expertise, but damn, those people are expensive. Just because I'll give a use case. 3 people in one of their parents' garage, they've been toiling away, they've created that minimally viable product, and oh my God, 4 people bought it. Now what? Now they've got to actually build out a chart of accounts, build out a financial plan. They probably have working capital needs they didn't have before. They need to beef up their whole marketing effort. They don't have the money to do it anymore. So they're going to head over to Sand Hill Road or some seed investor group and start trying to raise the money. And the founding team is a really bright technologist and his buddy who got a marketing degree and was a sales rep for a tech company. So they saw the market. So good market intelligence, good tech understanding. You didn't hear about the accounting degree on that founding team. So now they're looking at this stuff going, now what? But just because they need a level of sophistication now to, what are those guys on Sand Hill Road going to be asking me? What do those questions mean? How does that translate to our business plan, our business model? Just because they need to be able to answer that doesn't mean they suddenly have a lot of money to do it. But they also don't need the person 5 days a week because it's still 3 guys in one of their parents' garage with 4 minimally viable product customers. Um,
Well, I think that's the interesting thing about Tech CXO, right? There's a lot of fractional CFO companies out there, right?
yep.
And what's been really exciting, I had the pleasure, DVD Partners had the pleasure of presenting to the whole, New York team. And I guess when I originally went onto the call, I thought, okay, I'm just going to speak to a bunch of CFOs, but it was more than that, right? And it was people from marketing. There's people from, a chief revenue officer.
Yep.
It's the full gamut of what a company really needs to grow. And in my conversations with you, it's been, a lot of it leads with finance, right? But you're able to then tap in other partners, to be able to really,
Yep.
fully serve
Yeah.
the company for their needs.
How we grew. I mean, the most common gap on a founding team is they don't usually have finance people. Uh,
Yep.
so we have 110 partners across the country. Half of us are CFOs. Simply because that's the most common gap on the leadership teams of these growing companies. Now, but 3 years into the company, our founding the CEO of our company who is also a career CFO, sitting down at lunch with the CEO of one of his clients, and they're saying, this is great. What you're doing all this work for us. Um, the sales process is just wobbly. We're getting stuff coming in the top of the funnel, but it's just it feels weird. But we're not big. How do we fix that? And I'd love to have somebody like you, just a day or two a week, kind of coaching and guiding our salespeople, creating sales process so we can begin to manage that funnel. And he said to Kent, you have anybody who does that? Kent, being a good entrepreneur, said, why, yes. And went out and found, the guys who created our revenue growth practice. Similarly experienced chief sales officers, chief marketing officers, chief revenue officers, interested in working for smaller companies, leveraging the experience they've gained in their full-time careers. Now, same use case, the founding technologist that we just talked about turns out to be an awesome programmer and real good visionary, but he's not a chief technology officer. He's not the person who can pick the two
Yeah.
things we're going to run sprints on this quarter to hit a release schedule. Day a week, work with that guy, create the structure to link the technology to the market need, to our ability to fund it, and create an accountable plan for how we're going to develop that. Or a little farther along the journey of the company, the founding CEO realizes, I'm a hell of a visionary, but I'm not very good at making the trains run on time. And doggone it, there's a lot of trains. Let's get somebody in here who's been a chief operating officer at scale, who can, again, a day a week, coaching that really bright 32-year-old, the college roommate of the CEO, who's bright. They've got it. They think holistically. But if somebody could sort of help them see around the next corner for what's going to happen as we scale, that person can be way more effective than if they have to go figure it out on their own.
Yeah, there's a lot of visionaries out there, but not enough executioners, right? And that's why having someone to fill that seat is super important, with the business.
Yeah, you didn't know what you were about to walk into, but on the team call this morning, the New York team call this morning, I played a video from Vistage on a 1 hour presentation by James Clear, the guy who wrote Atomic Habits.
I love it.
And one of my takeaways from that is we do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. And that's not a bad summary for a critical use case for a lot of Tech CXO engagements is create the management operating systems that allow marketing to fill the top of the funnel, sales to drive stuff through the funnel, development to develop the products that are going to fit the needs of those people that are not in the funnel now to bring them in, or finance to allocate the resources to make sure all that happens. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. So we've had the opportunity to, start to begin to partner on things, right? I mean, we are working with a lot of clients right now that are interested in doing kind of a roll-up strategy. We have clients that are looking to exit and different things like that. When's a good time or for someone to reach out to you guys? As far as, I mean, we talked about the guys in the garage just kind of starting the business out, right? But when's a real good time that somebody should be probably thinking about reaching out to you?
The most common triggers we see are we've outgrown our friends and family round and we need more money. And I'm starting to talk to institutional capital folks. And I swear they're speaking English, and I swear the words mean something different than what I thought they did. Just the terms of art that exist in every area, including finance. So a lot of our clients join us when they're approaching some kind of a capital markets transaction. Fundraising, very typically, exits later on at a more mature level, and M&A along the way.
Got it.
There's also a pretty good size fraction of our clientele that are just aware enough to say, geez, the wheels are wobbling here a little bit. I wonder what that is. I'm getting surprised by stuff that as soon as I hear it, I say, why is this as a surprise? Well, because you don't have a management operating system that's been consciously designed for your business to give you the early warnings of this is a developing issue. So I guess that ultimately comes down to two things. Either the wheels are wobbling and I know I need help someplace because the wheels are wobbling and it's hard to keep the car moving straight, or I'm contemplating some kind of a capital market transaction. Now there's a variation on that theme. It's sort of the combination. Client I was working on just before this call does mom and dad started the business, neat proprietary product, bounced along, got it to the point where it was a couple of $1 million and they were starting to get beyond their garage. And had a son who was graduating from college, had been a baseball player all through college. And we need help. And hey, Drew could do this. And then they started realizing the complication about accounting. So Drew, the left fielder, brought in Kevin, the catcher, to be the head of finance. And then it started getting enough volume through their factory that they needed an operations person. So they got the third baseman to come in and do that. But these are kids who graduated from college in 2018. They're bright, they're dedicated, they've learned a lot. And the company bounced along, got through got through COVID, up to 5 million and down to 3, and they were bouncing back. 2022, they had a little over $5 million in revenue, marginally profitable. They've been raising capital all along the way. And then they got all the pieces right. Got the go-to-market right, got the supply chain right so that their margins got a lot better. They went from $5 million to $19 million between 22 and 23. They're on target to exceed $30 million this year. And the CEO is same age as mom and dad. And mom and dad were smart enough to bring him in early as a full-time guy. And Steve just recognized, all three of these guys, my head of accounting, let's call him controller, VP finance, my head of marketing, all these people, they know what I can teach them, but they need more help. So I'm in there working with the controller. We put an inventory control system in place. We built out a financial model that projects out in detail, actually integrates in all of their web data and Shopify and Amazon stuff and into the financial model directly and very granular. He's done a whole bunch of really sophisticated things that when this company goes to exit at 30 or 40 million bucks in revenue, the institutional investors or the strategics who are going to come in and do the quality of earnings work on them they're going to expect to see it, and now they're going to see it. So
I love it.
The wheels were wobbling. People needed mentoring. A year or two from now, there's going to be an exit. So it kind of merges those themes that I was talking about before. Now,
awesome. Is there any specific industries that you're really interested in right now? I mean, is there anything in particular?
Not really. We were founded as Tech CXO because the two founders came out of the software technology industry.
Yeah.
And in Atlanta, Georgia is where the company was founded. Uh, they put a brand on it that kind of fit what they knew and what they wanted to do with this platform. Uh, but it's an eat what you kill platform. It's our secret sauce for how we make the platform as efficient as we make it. Uh, so our business goes where our clients where our partners networks takes our business. So today, what you and I would call technology is probably half the business.
Okay.
But the client I just talked about is a consumer product company. You know,
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I know Ron, who I met, who originally introduced me, Ron Giaquinto. He's an engineering. Has an engineering background,
in
right?
engineering
So
professional services, not
yeah,
products.
professional services as well, right? So I mean, that's been something that you guys have been really into. But that's interesting. You're doing consumer products as well.
Oh,
So
with my career, all these engineering businesses, my very first client was a company that's in the live event space.
wow,
But they
it's
had a
crazy.
promising young controller who they thought had the potential to grow up and become a full scope CFO. So they brought me in as a day a week coach, and it went from there. She became their CFO. She eventually got recruited away from them because she was pretty good. Uh, so I stepped back in there again to do some interim stuff to help them bridge until they found Barry's replacement. Now, so use case is really what drives it, and network. Um, so in New York, to nobody's surprise, financial services is a decent sized practice for us. All these early stage fintech businesses, um, they fit the use case.
Got it.
And
Yeah,
there's a lot of them because it's New York.
for sure, for sure. So I mean, it sounds like I'm talking to Ted Stone, but I mean, it feels like the biggest takeaway that I'm getting from this, right, is it feels like to me like the CFO is really the keystone to the organization as a whole, right? So if companies are starting to kind of feel like things are getting a little bit wonky, it might be good to just engage with you guys, just to come in and take a look at everything to make sure things don't get wonky.
Yeah. Um, yes. Yes, and again with a qualifier that I've got a whole bunch of market revenue growth, marketing, sales, IT, operations partners um, who go into a client engagement where they already have a perfectly fine finance function, but they need help with something else. Now, so that's one perspective: is you don't have to put a CFO in there first before you're qualified to bring in a marketing guy or a product guy. Now, the way our company runs, I mean, substantially all of our CFO engagements, the CFO makes the sale. It might be a third to a half of our marketing engagements. A Tech CXO person in there already recognizes and convinces the company, hey, you need the version of me in marketing. And we have one of those. And we've got a marketing partner from Tech CXO helping the chief marketing officer of this consumer products company just for a day a week, just helping Drew, see what's coming around the corners. Now, so it's not It's not like finance first and then everything else. That's not a rule. That's just the way it sort of plays out because of the gaps in leadership teams. Now, just because you don't have a Tech CXO, CFO in your company doesn't mean that you shouldn't think about the other functional areas if that's where the wobbling's going on.
So I'm gonna just totally change things up real quick before we wrap up. And you mentioned James Clear, Atomic Habits. I'm a big habit guy, daily routine guy. What is the daily routine of Ted Stone that keeps him sharp on a regular basis?
Uh, Damned if I know, frankly. I mean, I dance on the end of five strings from five clients, and I do my best to eat my own cooking. So every one of them has a plan that we're pursuing, so that I can get I can anticipate, probably 2/3 of what I do for every client I can anticipate, but 1/3 is something happens in the client's world. I've
Yep.
different client who just, a customer of theirs represents 20% of their business, has just had some turnover in the business team that we sell into. So no, I did not wake up yesterday morning anticipating that we were going to have a conversation about how are we going to, respond to these changes. But we did. So
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, I'd go on site, this live events business, with the 1 day a week of coaching. Every Tuesday morning and Thursday afternoon, I'd be on site with the company, so I could be physically there. Pandemic obviously changed all that. Although I'm spending Monday and Tuesday of next week on site with this consumer products company. We're interviewing a bunch of investment banks because we're going to have an exit transaction in the first or second quarter of next year after we get through the holiday season. So by and large, though, I'll work on client A from 9 to 10, and then I got a meeting from 10 to 11 with client B, and then I've got a meeting from noon to 1 with client C. And then I've got some quiet time because I've got to build out a financial model for client D. Bouncing back and forth all the time.
Yep.
And
Yep.
planning when I can.
So, Ted, where are you finding most of your clients these days?
Predominantly networking, and networking among a whole group of, from our point of view, selfishly, we'd prefer them to be non-competitive but complementary professional services companies that serve the same emerging growth companies that we serve. So
absolutely,
our number one referral source are investment banks. Surprise, surprise. I mean, you're looking at companies that you're excited about their business, but they're never going to survive due diligence, or they need to mature for a couple of more years with a management operating system, so they put 2 good years behind them, so that you've got something to go market. We can help in both of those cases. As I said, mostly networking, you network where the work is. What did Willie Sutton say? Why do I rob banks? Because that's where the money is. I network with folks who are in the same ecosystem that I'm in. And we find ways to know each other so that we had a bake-off to pick the investment bank who's going to work with this consumer products company. And there's four bankers coming in, and one of them is going to get the gig.
Well, the one thing that I would say that my favorite thing about you has been you're just a genuinely such a positive guy. And that's something that really makes me happy. I've met a lot of CFOs that are very into the numbers, but they don't have the engaging personality that you do. And pretty much everybody on your team that I've met has the same engaging personality. But before we wrap up, what is the best way for the listeners to be able to engage with Tech CXO and the New York team here?
Probably the most straightforward thing is come to me, and I'll help you find the right Tech CXO solution, if there is one. I'll help you figure out if there is a right Tech CXO solution. I'm ted.stone@techcxo.com. Look just like it sounds.
Absolutely.
And if you just want to learn more about it, just go to techcxo.com, the website, and navigate around. You'll see bios of 110 people that look like me, plus some principals. You'll see a bunch of case studies, different use cases for different functional areas of expertise. And the website also has a place to just say, hey, I want to set up a meeting, and begin exploring it. But personal touch is what works. So I'm
absolutely,
and the inbound emails from me, and I'll make sure you get to the right person.
Sounds good. Well, Ted, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you much, Michael. Really enjoyed this.